live that Elijah Wheeler is no longer the head coach of SimWorld Oceania. Real quick, I guess we could start on that. I'm not surprised. I think you're going to see a lot of this summer. I don't think Wheeler is going to be the first, or he was the first, and he's not going to be the last coach that's let go this season for any number of reasons. I don't think the reason for him getting released of his position was necessarily due to the performance of the team. I think it was primarily due to, from what I've been told, not most recently, but just throughout the season, I don't think he was involved to the point that people wanted him to be. So I think you're going to see some more of that. That's basically all I would say to that point. But that's not why we're here. Well, we're here. The race to one, we are just a couple of days away. And so we're going to go through. We released earlier today. Was happy to join Rick's Blazing Takes to offer some of my own, though Rick beat me to the punch on a couple, I think. But we are going to be going through each conference today and on Friday, or Wednesday and on Friday, to talk about why each team can win and why each team cannot win the race to one. And because Rick and I started on the Legacy Conference, we're going to start on the Legend Conference. And we're just going to go 1 through 8, and we're going to tell you why each team can win and why each team will not win the race to one. You've seen my predictions for the first 2 rounds. I'm not a huge prediction guy because you're going to be wrong as much, if not more than you're right. I mean, hopefully less than, but I think a lot of people end up still batting probably around 60%, let's say, which is why I don't love prediction game, but such is life, and that's what people like to hear. So we're going to go through 1 through 8, and this is purely step aside. Here's the case for how they can win. Here's the case for why they won't. Let's start with Southeast Select, the top team. The case that they can win, Trey Turner. Straightforward. I think this was on Hard in the Paint Monday or Tuesday, obviously, because this is Tuesday that we're recording this. No one's beating Trey Turner's record, 127, 66%. Somebody might get more than 127, maybe, in a regular season, but nobody's shooting 66%. 2/3 of his threes Trey Turner's making. Those are unbelievable numbers. That's big man dunk percentage numbers that Trey Turner does from 3. That's why they're going to win. That's why if you look at, we fast forward, they win this thing. Trey Turner going off is why Southeast Select can win this thing. Why won't they win it? They won't win it because after Trey Turner, there really is not a ton of offensive production. Coach Lee has done a great job of building a defensive team. This is hands down one of the better defensive teams in the league. They are the second best, second fewest opponent points per game, 63.4, second best opponent field goal percentage, 44.5. They are a phenomenal defensive unit, but where they've struggled is to have somebody besides Trey Turner put together an offensive production. So if Trey Turner gets cold, they really start scraping the ball. Terrell Pearson's fine. Gabe Pope is good. Keandre Baldridge is fine, but none of them are elite scorers that can carry a team if Trey Turner's off. So if Turner's on, Southeast Select is rolling. If Turner's not, they're in trouble. Funny little point for you here. Ready? The 3-point attempts per game, Southeast Select is 6th in the league. And behind Trey Turner, they have nobody that's made more than 22 three-pointers. So Trey Turner himself is essentially a top 10 three-point shooting team. That's awesome. All right, Best Coast Ballers, number 2 seed. Why are they going to win? They're going to win because, well, you guessed it, Lacedarius Outlaw. I have maintained, by the time you hear this, you will hear my point on LDO on Rick's Pod. I think Lacedarius Outlaw is a phenomenal basketball player. And when he's on, he is maybe the best player in the league. That's why they're going to win. Why they're not going to win is because they, again, don't have anything else. I've said this multiple times behind that. Lacedarius Outlaw is awesome, but he is so inefficient because he's not given any type of offensive support. There has to be a way for this team to find that this offseason. Now, obviously, Lacedarius Outlaw departing. He is not going to be back next season. He has not made his college decision public, but he is out. That's going to be a very interesting storyline for this team. They are returning only 2 players next season. Landon Colton and Austin Ajavon. Dre Ryder, I beg your pardon. That's it. This team is building from scratch. Coach Murray's got his hands filled with trying to figure this thing out if he makes the cut. But they're going to win because Lacedarius Outlaw is phenomenal, and they're going to lose because Lacedarius Outlaw needs help. When he sits, this team just gets blown off the floor. It is not a good group without him there. They do not have anybody that can create. Their second best creator is Landon Coylton, and he's shooting 42% from the floor. Their next best is Gizio Wright-Johnson. He's shooting 41%. Sure, you can make the case. Why isn't Sky Buckner-Williams getting more minutes? Dre Ryder should have the ball in his hands more. I would agree with both of those takes, but it hasn't happened. And is it suddenly going to? I don't think so. All right, number 3 seed, H-Town Hoopers. Why are the Hoopers going to win the championship? Because they've got a 2-man combination and some good 3-point shooting behind it that's very dangerous. Terrell Thompson could be the second best big man in the league. Good scorer. He's on very low volume, but he's actually flashed an ability to shoot threes, 38%. Only 5 made. I am underscoring this as low volume, but that's a good sign for a 17-year-old to project forward into the next level of basketball. Keith and Carter, yes, he's inefficient, but him and Vincent Magic can be prone to big games. And, of course, Cam Jones, who you'd like to have seen get the ball more, 51% shooter from deep, yet he doesn't get enough playing time. Those guys are really good. There's a lot of pieces when you add in Aaron Payne that you feel confident about. With Payne and Thompson, that's one of the better front courts in SimWorld hoops. But the reason they're not going to win is because you don't know on a game-to-game basis what we're going to get. And this is very common for a lot of these middle-of-the-road teams. H-Town is an above-middle-of-the-road team, and Coach Banks is tasked with kind of making them even better than that. But when you look, game is on the line, close game, who are you turning to for H-Town? They haven't figured that out. And that's why they would be troublesome for me to pick. And again, you've already heard that I don't pick them on Rick's pod. That's because I just don't know, at the end of the game, what are we getting out of them? That's concerning for me if I'm saying this is a champion. That's why they're not going to win, but of course they have players that are prone to big games that can lead them to a win. Moving to Showtime, number 4. Why will they win? I said this on the pod with Rick. Whatever happens at the end of this game, we're going to know. We're going to look back and be like, of course that happened. And they're going to win, or they could win it all, because Corey Yams finally is given a runway. Nick Moss and Israel Vines are finally given the opportunities to showcase who they can be. They've really struggled to find their way with Bronny on the bench, and I think a lot of that is because they've played polar opposite brands of basketball. When Bronny's on the floor, it's 100% we're going through Bronny every single possession. However, when he's off the floor, they play a completely different game. There's no flow to it because you're being asked to just pick up out of nowhere and start something completely different. You're now going through a different guy, or you've combined the minutes of Corey Yams to be with Bronny James, so you don't have him on the floor when you need him to be. So they can win because those guys finally shine. They won't win because, look, there's still no Bronny. At the end of the day, he is probably the best player in SimWorld Hoops. He was most certainly the most dominant player on any given night in terms of you just knew what you were going to get from him. High volume, efficient scorer. I mean, look, you want to talk about the difference between LDO and Bronny James, it's right there. They're averaging the same amount of points, yet Bronny James is more efficient at basically everything. But they won't win because after him, they have not shown to be anything, even in his absence. You had the great Corey Yams game, and then we got nothing. So they could win it, but they won't because of that. Again, we're not making predictions here. We're just telling you why each team could and why each team could not win. Let's move to 5, Bay Area Breakers. Why are they going to win? Because they are the deepest team in SimWorld Hoops. I know that it's the common answer might be Rocky Mountain, but I'm sorry, it's not. It's Bay Area. They've got 8 guys, actually maybe 9. Sorry, Blake. 9 guys that are starting on literally every other team in the league. Yet Ricky O'Neal, Ronnie Shanahan, Curtis London, Dime Hardaway, Adonis Knight are all coming off the bench, at least one of them, or at least all but one of them. They are still the deepest team, right? You look at their starting 5, they are long, they are lengthy, they do not have... Dime Hardaway is the only guy in their rotation under 6'3". Blake Gyllenwater, yeah, he's out there, but he's not really out there. all of these guys are phenomenal. And that was, again, the biggest concern that we had with this team, that they're so deep that that's going to be an impediment to it. And in many cases it has. And that's why they won't win, because they have not found a guy to turn to late in games. Is it going to be Caden Shipp? Is it going to be Royce Anderson? Is it going to be Trey Hyman? All those guys are more than capable of pulling that off. But the challenge has been is that there hasn't really been a creation of a pecking order. And if you look at, and I know we're looking at NBA champions, so it's a little bit different, but the game of basketball is still the game of basketball. Those teams all featured a guy that can, at any given moment, go off and take over a game. Bay Area doesn't have that guy. And that's why, if you look at how do we project this as a champion, that's where you get concerned. But again, their depth should outweigh that and make you feel confident that they could make a run. Moving down, number 6, Yacht Club. Why could they win? They could win because Dominic Bianco is a top 10 player. Adam Max has looked phenomenal since his return, and Jay Laster has been a fantastic second fiddle. Meanwhile, they actually have some great depth of their own with Trey Willis, Garrett Hart, Tamir Johnson, and DeMarco Graham. Add in Tyshawn Esom. This is actually a really deep team that struggled early in the season. They dug themselves a really deep hole that they had to then climb out of because Adam Max was suspended by the team. Now, I think that suspension warranted. There was plenty of reason to suspend him, and he earned his way back into the rotation after 11 games. But now that they are fully healthy, this is probably a team that if you played out the entirety of the season, I think they probably end up, they finished with 17 wins. They're getting to at least 20. I really think they're probably a 20-win team, and they're a top 3 seed. Instead, they struggled early, and they end up with 17, and here they are. Why won't they win? They won't win because I still have my reservations about Dominic Bianco as a number 1 guy, and they haven't really turned the ball over to Jay Laster a lot to make this thing happen. They won't win because their depth at the big man position is not great, but it's good, but it's not great. And in the wrong matchup, especially against a team like early on, H-Town Hoopers with Tyrell Thompson, what happens if Adam Max struggles against the two-headed monster of Tyrell Thompson and Aaron Payne? That's not a great matchup for the Yacht Club because after you got Tyshawn Esom and Adam Max, yes, DeMarco Graham's good, but he hasn't proven to be a great, reliable threat, though his minimal track record indicates he potentially could be. They don't have great wing defenders. In fact, they have next to no wing defenders that you can turn to, so their defense has been suspect. If the right sequence of events happens where their shots aren't falling, in which case for Dominic Bianco, his three-point shot isn't falling, he's shooting 25%, and he can't get to the rim with his speed, or if Jay Laster's really struggling from deep, he's their best three-point shooter, they don't have guys that can string together a lot of stops for them to then get wins. All right, moving on. Number 7, Asia Pacific. How could they win? Asia Pacific could win this thing because they've actually got a handful of guys that you really like. They've got 4 dudes averaging 9 or more points. Jacoby Reyes is a recent player of the week. Kai Newby has been very good at times this season, and J.D. Reyes is a really good third or fourth guy. You feel confident that they've got some good depth. You feel like you could, on any given night, turn to any one of those guys, and they will provide exactly what you need. Meanwhile, why won't they win? They're not big. Stephen George is their largest guy, 6'11". The next biggest dude is 6'8", Jin Son Deng. They have nobody that's averaging more than 8 rebounds per game. That's Stephen George. After him, it's Deng averaging 5.9. They get beat up on the boards consistently. That's not a great recipe for building a championship team. Physically, they are beat up. Meanwhile, they hound the rebounds. They're second in the league in rebounds, so it's not necessarily a size issue, but more so other way around. It's not necessarily a effort issue, it's a size issue, and that could be exposed at the wrong time. They're not a good shooting team, 23rd in the league, 26th from deep. If they're not getting boards, if they're not stopping the opponent from getting rolling, then that's where they've had trouble, and there's 22nd in opponent points per game. So if that recipe comes together, you don't like their potential outcome. All right, number 8 seed, Lone Star Basketball Club. Why could they win? Because I still really like their backcourt. Jace Miguez, composite ranked number 11th in the league. Nindy Gibson's 22. Derek Long is 42. Those 3 guys anchor an incredible roster. Mason Green is shooting 70% from the floor as their starting 4. I am still extremely high on Chase McGiz. Nady Gibson has struggled really badly in these last couple games, but or the last 2 months, but he's still a really good player when he's getting going. They've got pieces to this roster that you have to look at and say, yes, we're confident that those guys can put it together. And they were at one point in time, by middle of May, this was a team contending for the number 1 seed. But why won't they win? Because since that time, they've won just 2 games. Their offense, 26th in the league. Their defense, though, is 7th. So they've really fallen off the table in terms of offense. If their defense isn't on, that's going to be a challenge for them. If they can't hit shots, which, again, most recently they've been mediocre to bad at doing, then that's a real concern for this team in winning a championship. And they're going up against a team in Southeast Select that's phenomenal at defense and can light you up on any given night on offense. That's not a great recipe for Lone Star. So if you want to project them out, that's where your concern is. But again, you've got players in Chase McGiz and Nady Gibson that you really have to like. All right, that is the Legend Conference. We will be back on Friday, and we're going to talk Legacy Conference. Have a great night.